I want you to be something that's never existed before." Tim Burton's words hung in the Connecticut air like a death sentence. Christopher Walken put down his gardening tools and stared at the director who just changed everything. But wait, this story starts weeks earlier, in the most unexpected place. Hollywood, 1998. Tim Burton has a massive problem. Sleepy Hollow needs the Headless Horseman, and every attempt to cast the role has failed miserably. "It's impossible," he tells producer Scott Rudin. "How do you make someone scary without a head, without dialogue, without any of the tools actors normally use?" Every A-list action star has auditioned. They approach it like a stunt job. All muscles and sword fighting, but no soul. Burton realizes he needs something different. Someone who understands that true terror comes from psychological presence, not physical intimidation. That's when he remembers Max Schreck. 7 years earlier, Christopher Walken had terrified audiences in Batman Returns without raising his voice. He'd created genuine menace through pure commitment to character truth. What if the Horseman isn't about action? Burton realizes. What if he's about inevitability? But here's the problem. Christopher Walken has never heard of Sleepy Hollow. He's not answering his phone. His agent says he's retired to the country. So Tim Burton does something crazy. He drives to Connecticut. October morning, 1998. Walken is working in his garden, enjoying the autumn peace. No Hollywood pressure, no scripts to read, no roles to consider. That's when a black car pulls into his driveway. Tim Burton gets out, looking nervous and desperate. "Christopher," he says without introduction, "I need you to become death itself." Most actors would think Burton has lost his mind, but Christopher Walken sees something in the director's eyes that stops him cold. Genuine terror. "What are you afraid of?" Walken asks. "Failing," Burton admits. "This character could be incredible or completely ridiculous. I need someone who can make the impossible feel real." They talk for 3 hours in Walken's kitchen. Burton explains Washington Irving's original story. A headless specter riding through colonial forests, claiming souls for crimes committed in darkness. "No dialogue," Burton repeats. "No face. Everything has to come through movement and presence." Here's what makes Christopher Walken different from every other actor Burton approached. He doesn't see this as a limitation. He sees it as the ultimate challenge. Movement is dialogue, Walken realizes. The way someone walks tells you everything about their psychology. Burton pulls out concept art. Ralph McQuarrie's drawings of the Horseman. Dark rider emerging from fog, sword raised, cape flowing like liquid shadow. "This is what death looks like," Burton says. Walken studies the images with focused intensity. He's seeing something Burton doesn't expect. He's not angry, Walken observes. He's not cruel. He's just fulfilling his function. "Exactly," Burton gets excited. "Like a force of nature, like winter or gravity." That's when Christopher Walken makes the decision that changes everything. "I'll do it, but I have conditions." What he demands next will create one of cinema's most terrifying villains. "I want to research the character like he's real," Walken says. "I want to understand how death moves, how it exists in physical space." Burton agrees to everything. Over the next 8 weeks, Christopher Walken disappears into preparation that borders on supernatural. He studies medieval manuscripts depicting death figures, analyzes how different cultures visualize mortality as a physical presence. He spends hours in his Connecticut woods, practicing different ways of moving through trees and undergrowth, understanding how someone who's been riding the same forest for centuries would navigate familiar terrain. The Horseman isn't bound by human limitations, he tells his wife Georgianne. He's something else entirely. But the real breakthrough comes when Walken starts working with the horse. Most actors would learn basic riding skills. Christopher Walken develops a supernatural partnership. "The horse has to respond to me like it's responding to a force of nature," he explains to the animal trainers. He spends weeks creating communication that goes beyond normal rider command. The horse learns to sense his intentions through pure energy. When filming begins in England, something extraordinary happens. Christopher Walken arrives on set, and even in costume fittings, the crew feels unsettled. There's something about his presence that makes people nervous. He wasn't acting yet, cinematographer Emmanuel Lubezki recalls, but there was already something different about his energy. The first day of riding, Walken and his mount move through Burton's Gothic forest like they've been doing it for centuries. The horse anticipates his needs without visible command. It was genuinely eerie, producer Scott Rudin admits, like watching something that shouldn't exist but somehow does. Johnny Depp, playing Ichabod Crane, has the strangest reaction. "I know it's Christopher under all that costume," he tells Burton, "but when he's riding toward me, every instinct says run." That's exactly what Burton wanted. The Horseman should trigger primal fear, not conscious thought. But here's where Christopher Walken's performance becomes legendary. The beheading scenes require him to convey the character's transformation from human human warrior to supernatural entity, without dialogue, without facial expressions. Walken accomplishes this through pure physical storytelling. The moment the horseman loses his head, his posture changes. He becomes something that was human once, but has been transformed into an instrument of cosmic justice. Christopher showed us the exact second when the character stops being a person and becomes a force, Burton explains. The headless scenes present even greater challenges. Walken performs with green fabric covering his head, relying entirely on body language to convey personality. I can't see, can't hear properly, can't speak, he tells the crew. I have to trust that my body knows what the character needs to do. The result is genuinely disturbing. The horseman moves through scenes with purpose that feels inevitable rather than human. There's something about watching Christopher work headless that's actually frightening, stunt coordinator Nick Powell admits. The forest chase scenes become the film's most memorable sequences. Walken rides through Burton's carefully constructed Gothic landscape, pursuing victims with relentless supernatural determination. What makes these scenes terrifying isn't just the visual spectacle. It's Christopher Walken's commitment to playing the horseman as a natural force rather than a movie monster. He doesn't hunt like a human predator, Burton observes. He pursues his targets with the inevitability of natural law. When Sleepy Hollow premieres, critics immediately recognize something unique. The Headless Horseman joins the ranks of cinema's truly iconic monsters, writes horror specialist Kim Newman. Christopher Walken has created genuine terror without traditional acting tools, but the real impact goes beyond critical praise. The performance influences how other actors approach physical roles in fantasy and horror film. Walken's demonstration that supernatural characters require completely different techniques becomes essential viewing. Film schools start using the performance as a case study in nonverbal character work. How do you suggest complex psychology through pure physicality? Study Christopher Walken in Sleepy Hollow becomes standard advice for actors entering genre films. Young performers realize that the most powerful performances sometimes require abandoning everything they think they know about their craft. He didn't just play the Headless Horseman, one film student writes. He became something that genuinely didn't seem human. 25 years later, the performance remains a masterclass in commitment to impossible characters. Christopher Walken proved that great actors can create truth in any situation, no matter how fantastical or challenging. 8 weeks after Tim Burton said "Become Death," Christopher Walken had transformed into the Headless Horseman. But more than that, he'd redefined what supernatural villains could accomplish when portrayed with complete psychological commitment. The man who grew vegetables in Connecticut became something that rides through nightmares. And somehow, both versions of Christopher Walken feel equally real. That's what happens when great actors stop trying to be human and start trying to be true. Sometimes truth exists beyond humanity, in forces that operate according to different rules entirely. Christopher Walken found those rules and made them terrifyingly real. Death itself, indeed. But the story of Christopher Walken's transformation doesn't end when cameras stopped rolling, because what happened during those 8 weeks of filming changed him in ways nobody expected. Cast and crew members start reporting strange experiences, dreams about the horseman, feelings of being watched in the English forest where they filmed. There was something genuinely unsettling about the whole production, Johnny Depp admits years later. Like we'd awakened something that was better left sleeping. Christopher Walken feels it too. For months after filming Wraps, he finds himself moving differently, walking with the same predatory grace he developed for the horseman. His wife notices he approaches people with unusual intensity. Something of that character stayed with him, Georgianne observes. Not in a bad way, but definitely in a permanent way. Film scholars begin studying the behind-the-scenes footage, analyzing how Walken's method acting approach created such authentic supernatural presence. He didn't just play the Headless Horseman, writes cinema professor Janet Maslin. He appears to have channeled something genuinely otherworldly. The costume department reports unusual incidents during filming, equipment that should have been stored properly found in different locations, the horseman's cape moving without wind, small things that could be explained rationally but felt significant. Working on that film was like participating in an actual haunting, costume designer Colleen Atwood recalls. But the most disturbing reports come from the horse trainers. The animals used in the film continue responding to Christopher Walken months after production ends. Not normal trained responses, but something deeper, like they still recognize him as something supernatural. Those horses react to Christopher differently than any other human, head trainer Steve Dent explains. It's like they see something the rest of us can't. This extended impact fascinates Burton, who realizes his collaboration with Walken created something beyond typical movie making. We didn't just film a performance, he reflects. We documented a genuine transformation from human to something else. The experience influences Burton's subsequent project. He becomes more interested in working with actors who can access psychological territories beyond normal human experience. Christopher Christopher showed me that the best performances happen when actors stop trying to be relatable and start trying to be true to whatever the character actually is. This philosophy shapes Burton's later collaborations with Johnny Depp, Helena Bonham Carter, and other performers willing to disappear completely into unusual characters. But for Christopher Walken, the Headless Horseman represents something even more significant, proof that his greatest strength as an actor isn't his distinctive voice or unsettling presence. It's his willingness to abandon his own identity completely in service of character truth. Most actors bring themselves to their roles, film critic Roger Ebert observes. Christopher brings his roles to himself, and sometimes they stay there. This understanding guides Walken's subsequent career choices. He stops looking for parts that showcase his personality and starts seeking characters that challenge his conception of what performance can accomplish. The result is a late career renaissance that includes some of his most memorable work: Catch Me If You Can, Wedding Crashers, Hairspray, roles that prove his range extends far beyond psychological intensity. The Horseman taught me that I could be anyone, Walken explains in rare interviews about the experience. Not just versions of Christopher Walken, but completely different beings. Young actors begin seeking him out for advice about approaching challenging physical roles. His response is always the same: don't try to make it human. Find out what it actually is, then become that. This guidance influences a new generation of performers in fantasy and horror film. They learn that supernatural characters require abandoning normal acting techniques entirely. Christopher Walken's Headless Horseman is the gold standard for non-human roles. Acting coach Stella Adler tells her students, study how he moves, how he occupies space, how he suggests intelligence without normal communication. Film schools begin offering entire courses on physical character work, using Walken's performance as the primary example of how experienced actors adapt their techniques to impossible demands. But perhaps the most significant impact is on audiences who discover that genuine terror can come from performances that operate entirely beyond familiar human psychology. The Headless Horseman taps into primal fears about death and inevitability that spoken dialogue could never access. Christopher Walken's complete commitment to the character's alien nature creates something authentically frightening. You forget you're watching an actor, writes horror specialist Dread Central. Walken disappears so completely into the Horseman that he becomes genuinely supernatural. This effect creates a template for how future monster movies can achieve authentic scares without relying on gore or jump scares. Real horror comes from performances that make you believe the impossible, Burton explains. Christopher proved that the right actor can make any creature feel real. The collaboration also establishes a new standard for director-actor relationships in genre film. Burton's willingness to let Walken completely reimagine the character creates something neither could have achieved alone. Tim trusted me to find the Horseman from the inside out, Walken reflects. That kind of creative freedom is rare and precious. This trust produces results that continue influencing filmmakers decades later. Directors learn that their job isn't always to control every aspect of performance, but sometimes to create space for actors to discover things nobody anticipated. 8 weeks after Burton said "Become Death," Christopher Walken had created the Headless Horseman. But more importantly, he demonstrated that acting can be a form of genuine transformation, not just skilled pretense. Sometimes the best performances happen when actors stop trying to be themselves and start trying to be something that's never existed before. Christopher Walken's Headless Horseman proves that with enough commitment and trust, even the impossible can feel completely real. The gardener from Connecticut became death itself, and somehow both identities continue to coexist in the same extraordinary human being.